Greetings and welcome to The Thirsty Mage, the podcast that's old enough to have qualified for its own remastered edition. I'm your host David Lloyd, and in this episode we're going to be discussing at what point has an RPG aged so much that it's practically unplayable, and what classic RPG mechanics that modern RPGs need to avoid to stay relevant in this ever-evolving industry. Here to help me navigate this difficult topic is a man who enjoys classic games but has a modern sensibility. It's Jordan Rudick.
I've not just woken up early for this podcast, but I've also woken up and chosen violence. I'm definitely going to be a little bit more heated on some of the topics in this episode. So just a fair warning to listeners out there, David, that I'm going to be more than a little bit salty, and the reasons for that will become pretty clear soon.
Yep, there's a game that's been torturing you. That will be the focus of the episode. It's the inspiration behind the episode, really. Every so often we kind of get games like this. I feel like this is kind of a rehash of, I think it was like 2018 or 2019, something like that, when the Baldur's Gate ports came out for Switch, and you and I were so excited to play them, and they were just dumpster fires, and we let people know that we didn't like them, and the reaction was extremely... what's the word? Expected.
Yeah, I mean, we were completely in lockstep about how much we really hated these games, and we kind of collaborated on a video review for them too, which is funny enough one of the most of all the NWR YouTube videos. It's one that is constantly still being watched today. Funny enough, and it's us just slagging on these re-releases. So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of that tone or those feelings, I guess, kind of bubble up for this one, but we'll get into that a little bit later on today.
Yeah, you never underestimate the hate click.
For sure.
It's sad that that's the case, but it's the reality of the world, is that it seems like the controversial titles or topics are the ones that get the most clicks. So we'll see how this episode does when the title goes up. We'll see.
I mean, if you're looking for an episode where people talk fondly about things from the past that you love, you're probably not gonna get that here. So fair again, more fair warning that this is a little bit more about some things that are frustrating and bothering us about some older titles for sure.
Yeah, this is your final trigger warning. This episode may enrage you, especially if you're a retro video game fan. But before you pull out your pitchforks and warm up the tarred feathers, just know that we did love them, or we do love them, even if we make a derogatory comment about it in this episode. We just love them in spirit at this point.
I mean, in fairness, I think we're always looking for the good and the bad in these games. Like it's never just about, okay, this is terrible top to bottom. Like that, surely there are some redeeming qualities, and I obviously we're gonna hit on those, and I'll say that about the game that I'm going to talk about and the ones that you're going to talk about as well, regardless of how we play them, where we play them, what they are. Like we are, I guess, seasoned enough. We've played enough of these games that we can find things about them that are worth looking at or worth trying for, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of these RPGs, like, they're revolutionary for their time, but that's the thing about revolutionary, is that it's only revolutionary once. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so we're weeding out the ones that were big in at their time, but maybe not so fun to play now, and it's kind of similar to your book. It's the opposite of your book. Your book was to find the games that have stood the test of time, the timeless games. We're now going to take a look at the games that we feel like got too old. They have to go be pulled out behind the barn and put out to pasture.
Well, I was just thinking about that before we hopped on here. Is like, yeah, in a game in the life, like I know that not everyone will see the games that I do as being timeless, and that's fine. Like everyone has to have their own kind of perspective on it. But I do want to talk about today about specifically RPGs. What can give them that ability to stay around and to I guess maintain people's attention and stuff like that. And what in games that we're playing now, maybe they're from the past or more recent games. Like what are they doing to stay relevant, I guess, or what do they need to do to stay relevant? I think it's worth thinking about mechanics and qualities, elements of these games that just don't in 2024, I just don't think they belong. That's what I've been thinking about.
Yep. So yeah, we'll get into it. Like you said, I've been playing a few retro games, and having some interesting experience. And you have a new game that's a retro game that you'll be talking about in a bit. But I guess the first thing to start off with is to me, like, video games in general as an art form are interesting because they're it's so steeped in technology. Like when you think of the medium itself, it has there's limits to what a developer can do, what they can show you. They all have an idea in their head, and then it has to be kind of tempered to the platform that they're working on. So when you think of, because I always think of, like, there's all these books and music and paintings and all these sorts of things that, like, they last like decades, and they're still as good as they were before. Like how the Beatles are still getting listened to all the time. You got some incredible rock music from like the 70s and 80s. Like it's all got to last for a long time. But video games, like, they're when you think of where they started, back in the Commodore 64 days, Atari, uh, there was just, they had these grand visions, but there was only so many bits and bytes that they could actually put stuff on.
And there's only so many people that want to go back to play Commodore 64 games today, right?
Yeah.
And I think that number is growing smaller and smaller as like the pool of new games is coming out, or as games that built on those kind of legacies or the technology that were inspired by Commodore 64 and Atari and things like that, as they make or maybe reimagine those games, or kind of take those mechanics, take those ideas, and make their own game, but modernize it, right? I think we are looking for, I think for the most part, modern touches in our old games. I think we do want you know things that we see in newer games to appear in the older games we loved once upon a time.
Yeah.
And the rose-colored glasses can come off pretty quickly, I think, when you like. I think about an Atari collection I reviewed for NWR a couple of years ago, like 50 Atari games that came to Switch, and I'm playing through these games, and I'm like, most of these are I would borderline unplayable. Like they're just not fun. And yes, they were fun once upon a time. They were fun in the 70s or 80s when these games first came out to arcades or Atari consoles. But now, like you can't really. They're very hard to penetrate. Like, they're so hard to get into, and being kind of slagged in the comments a little bit, the video and my opinion, because you know I didn't necessarily grow up with these games. Like I played them a little bit as a kid, but certainly didn't grow up with most of that lineup. And if you did, yes, you still kind of love those things. But I think you could look at them and say, like, this hasn't aged very well. Like, you should try to have that objective perspective on it, is that there's a reason why we don't make games like this anymore. We don't make Atari games in 2024 because we have technology that allows us to do much more. And what's interesting about Atari especially is that they've kind of, as a company, they've evolved to be releasing kind of regularly these remakes of their own titles. And so some of them are good, some of them are just okay, but they're all kind of interesting, I guess. And they all seem to take a different perspective or a different tact when it comes to the actual remaking process. How faithful they're going to be. Like the Centipede game, Missile Command, I think they did. They're quite faithful. They don't change a lot. But maybe some other ones, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but they do a better job, or a different job, I suppose, of taking what was old and making it new again. And so I think companies are realizing, like, there's this nostalgia to capitalize on, and they've been realizing this for a long time, but it's now they're going even further back into their back catalogs because I think they have the technology to do that, and they have the wherewithal to do that now.
Yeah, well, it's even when you look at games that have kind of survived to this point, like the franchises and stuff. Like one that's topical is like Final Fantasy. Like, how many times does somebody say, I've never played a Final Fantasy. Which one should I start with? Uh, you shouldn't start with the first one, the NES one.
I
Like,
think I think our Discord asks this question like once a week.
yeah,
Feels like at least once a week, like which one to start with. As new folks join the Discord channels, in the general chat, there's always a which Final Fantasy question should I should I start with, or which one should I go back to even?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like you and I have so much fondness, the nostalgia factor. Like I have it high in my list of like the my favorite art Final Fantasy. You know, when I rank them and stuff. People who didn't grow up with it obviously would not have it anywhere near as high as I would have it in mine.
Hmm.
And especially Final Fantasy not being an ongoing story, like these are all one offs. Um, there's just again I have the nostalgia, that there's the familiarity when I play it that adds to the fun. But for someone who's never who's born in the 2000s, who's not a 20th century baby or whatever, you're probably just going to find these games frustrating, like, and
Yeah.
slow and that sort of thing. Like there's just too much modern changes that you you have to put up with. That I guess it would be like trying to like show someone a TV show from the 50s and say, well, this show was better than
Hmm.
Fallout now or something. I guess,
Yeah,
wait a
no
minute.
chance. Yeah.
Like it's just you can't take like the sensibilities or the culture and try to kind of force feed it through.
I mean, we know better though than to recommend, oh, you should start with Final Fantasy on the NES. Like, no, you shouldn't. No, no one should. That shouldn't be anyone's first Final Fantasy game at this point. Even though it was ours, and even though like we have a fondness for this game because when we were kids, that was our first one, and so it developed a love of a genre and a series that has persisted. But no, I think the pixel remaster version of Final Fantasy VI is an excellent place to start because it
Mm.
has modern sensibilities. It does look good. It does, it is still a game that totally holds up. Whether you play like the original Super Nintendo version or not, this is a game that it has stood the test of time. It's I think it's easy to see why something like that it did show up in my book as the one Final Fantasy game, and I would happily recommend that to people now. I think 4 is a decent entry point. I think 7 and 9 are decent entry points, but 6 is probably the best one. Like it's the best one to start with. If you wanted to foster a love of Final Fantasy in people, you tell them to start with 6 or maybe 7. Those are the two kind of easy original game type recommendations to make, I think.
Yeah, and with the new ports too, because like you said, they've added in modern sensibilities,
Yeah.
like fast forwarding,
Take away
saves
random
anywhere,
encounters,
like
right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's just things that have gone away with the dodo that we need to acknowledge and move on from.
Mhm.
One of the topical things that's come out, and I mentioned it, was the show Followed has come out, and it's doing well. So people seem to enjoy it. I'm seeing on social media there's kind of this instinct of, well, I've never played a Fallout, but I really enjoyed the show. Where should I start? And so I thought, okay, well, I've played all the modern Fallouts. I've been meaning to play the original Fallouts, and so I decided to give it a shot. So I decided to play. Not only did I play the original Fallout, but I've also tried to play what kind of led to Fallout, which was Wasteland. So this is Wasteland was again the same developers that Brian Fargo, I believe, is the guy that was doing those. So Wasteland came out. I can't remember the original platform, but I know I've given it a try on Commodore 64 and given it a try on DOS. It is just beyond any value of playing at this point.
Yeah.
Like it's just so it's such like the idea is great. I love the but maybe back in the early 80s or whatever when this game came out, uh, how many games out there would take you on an adventure of a post-apocalyptic world? I think if you played it back then, terrific. But the text-based, you know, adventure where you're kind of just like this little sprite who's doing like this walking across kind of this ASCII map or whatever, or running into a wolf and then taking like 10 minutes to defeat the wolf. Like it's just no, it's just
Hmm.
no good. The original Fallout, which was also a CRPG back in the day, it actually its roots were then this Fallout is actually the spiritual successor to Wasteland. It was the next one in the kind of in Brian Fargo's repertoire there, but this one was much more. So this I played this one on DOS, Or sorry, this one is actually the Steam port on Fallout. I did install the DOS one, but there I read some stuff about how the Steam port was a little more playable, so I gave that a try. So I played this on a computer because CRPG, and I wanted the mouse. And there's some nice visuals. It has that very Fallout vibe, like you're a vault dweller that starts in the vault. There's this very basic. It's a much more basic premise in the sense that you start in Vault 13, and there's this chip or processor that runs the water filter in your vault, and they've kind of gone to the point where they can't repair this chip, and they basically have, I believe it's 4 months or 90 days, something like that. There's like a set amount of days that it's like, if we don't replace this chip, we're all going to die because we're going to run out of our water supply. So the vault dweller, leaves the vault, and in a CRPG kind of isometric overworld, you're basically walking the wilds trying to figure it out. Now, they do give you a bit of signposting at the beginning, because the overseer of Vault
Hmm.
13 tells you that, there's a Vault 15 east of us. So when you first get out of the vault, there's kind of this very basic. I guess you're underground, so there's this basic cave that you're supposed to walk through the cave, and then you kind of enter the overworld map. So there's a few rats you can stab with your knife for experience points, and then you get to the map, and then you kind of just choose. There's like a grid, and you choose where you want to go on the grid, and then there's this. It's basically a kind of an Indiana Jones style, I guess, where there's like a line that just kind of goes to where you had pointed to,
Hmm.
and you're watching it going through grid through grid. Sometimes you might stop halfway through because there is some kind of like you run into something, like maybe there's an enemy you have to fight, or you run into a caravan or a merchant or something. But you're basically, that's how you're navigating the overworld, is you're choosing which grid point to go to, and then there may or may not be a settlement there or something to explore. So in this case, you get to, between you and the second vault, there's like this little town, and then so you can go in there and you can kind of walk around and talk to everybody. You can get like one quest basically. It's like
Hmm.
they're having problems with rad scorpions, so they're like, oh, we need someone to go clean out the rad scorpion cave that's around here, and we also have Jim here who's been poisoned by a rad scorpion, so it'd be great if you could bring back a venom sac so we can give him an antidote. And then there's a few things you need to find. Again, now this is one of the things that bothers me about some of these old games, is that there is an item in the town. You're not told the item is in this town, but you need this item to be able to access Vault 15, which is
Hmm.
where you're supposed to be going. So what happened was, I go to the town, I'm talking to everybody. I gave myself a high charisma and intelligence, so I was able to talk this guy into, there's what do you call it, mercenary in the town, where he says, like, if you give me so much money, then I'll help you on your quest or whatever. But I was able to convince him to join me anyway, and we'll just split the money, whatever we gain. So I was able to get a companion very early on, and so we go to Vault 15, and we're walking around, and we're in the top floor of the vault, and then there's like an elevator shaft, and it says, "Oh, you can't get down there." And I'm like, "Okay, well." It tells you need something, but it doesn't tell you where it is or what it is.
Hmm.
So I'm walking around Vault 15. I can't find anything to help me, and I'm just killing all the rats that are on the ground. There's like a big there's one rat that looks like the in the Princess Bride when they're in the Forbidden Forest, and there's like the man-sized rats.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
There's like one of those that me
I
and the guy were
picture it.
like stabbing and shooting, and so that I had a good chuckle about that one. But I walked through the entire Vault 15. I was clicking on everything I could click on, and I'm like, oh, screw this, I'm gonna see the guide. And they're like, oh yeah, there's this one locker in this one building in the village that you were in, and there's a rope, and you need to go get that rope. Then you need to come back to Vault 15, and
Yeah.
then you can install the rope to get to the lower level. And then you need to find another rope and another locker inside Vault 15 on the second floor that gives you access to the third floor. And then when you get to the third floor, that's when you find out the thing you're looking for is not actually there.
Oh no.
And then that's your guide to be like, okay, now you need to just kind of go south to Junktown, and maybe you might find something there.
Yeah. Are you having fun yet? Like,
Yeah.
rhetorically, we're
Exactly.
asking this question. Like, the game is asking you this. Are you enjoying this? Is this what you want out of your
Yeah.
experience?
But when I think of like back in those days, back when games were primarily marketed to kids, like teenagers or whatever.
Mhm.
I don't think they were really in the 90s. They were just starting. I think like the kids who had just started playing video games in the 80s are probably getting a little bit older. They're not quite adults yet, so you have this kind of teenage vibe where you're aiming for them. So you have this kind of post-apocalyptic area, but
Mhm.
it's still that idea of like, we want you to spend time here, so we're not going to hold your hand on what you should do. Like, we expect you to go everywhere and click on everything and spend 50, 60 hours on this very uh, you know it wasn't primitive at the time. It was probably pretty revolutionary. It's like, oh,
Yeah, for
look at,
sure.
you got voice acting, and you got visuals, and you've got moving pictures and all these things. Like, you know, back then it was incredible, but now it's just, I don't have time for this crap.
I mean, this is the thing. Like, we're living in an age where like our time is not that time wasn't valuable before, but just there's so many more draws on our time now. We're constantly connected to people through our cell phones and the internet and stuff like that. Like, this wasn't a thing. It wasn't as big a thing back then. Constantly being available to everybody, and so the way that we play games, like it's very hard to just say, okay, I'm happy to do trial and error for like 50% of this playthrough. I'm happy to just like, not know where things are and click on everything and, just be bored for a while, I guess, with them while I'm getting to the next checkpoint or the next goal or something like that. Like, I think it's very hard to enjoy games that are built like that today. That feeling, especially when the answers are at our fingertips, right? With these old games, like I can just look up what I need to go, or where I need to go, or what I need to do. Like that information is so easy to access. And so if the solution is look everywhere and try everything, and I know that's not a fun activity, why would I keep doing it? Like,
Yeah.
I would rather get to the fun, the deliberately fun part of the game. Even if I lose some of what the original was trying to do, I think that's still worthwhile. I'd rather advance the story and see what comes next, what happens next. What is the plot? What happens at the end of the game? I'd rather get to the end of more games, I think, than experience them exactly as they were. I don't know. Is that a controversial stance to take? I'm not sure. I understand that some people won't be in line with me there. Like, they would rather just have things as they were. But we aren't living in 1997 anymore, or in Wasteland's case, 1988, right?
Yeah.
And I don't need, in playing these games, I don't need to replicate the exact year when they were released. I'm not traveling back in time. This is Back to the Future or something like that. I'm just going to enjoy them in 2024, taking as much of what they have in the past that's already built in, but I don't need to just ignore all the kind of modern things, or ignore all the information that's out there about these games. Like, people have written guides and given suggestions and tips for years for a reason, right? Because they do want to expedite this. I was looking at the speed runs for Fallout. For Fallout 1, the game that you played, speed runs are around 5 minutes, right? I think the best one is just under 5 minutes. So there are
Funny.
ways. Imagine a game that has. It's not that it doesn't have content. It's just that, like, maybe if you know exactly what to do, like, there's a way to just beat this game in minutes.
Yeah.
And so does that mean that this 60-hour game, most of that 60 hours is looking for things or trying to figure out where to go next? That lack of signposting, that lack of hand holding, and that was the content. That was okay back then. I
Yeah.
think that's less okay now, when the content is just figure it out yourself where to go, figure out who to talk to, what to do. I just don't. I don't know. I don't find that so fun these days. There's just too many other things that demand my time. If I have less time for games, I have less time for that kind of BS.
Yeah. Well, and even look at the landscape of games then and compared to now. Like when back in the 90s, like you would have had hundreds of games to choose from potentially, but they were all like expensive compared to what games are now. And then you think now you've got tens or hundreds of thousands of games. Like if you got a PC, like Steam has literally tens of thousands of games. Like if you got Switch, I think it's closing in on 10,000
Yeah,
games
it might
almost.
be. It might be.
Like and all like dirt cheap. Like there's games like you could be, and then when you think of like Game Pass, like you got hundreds of games for $15 a month. Like
Mm-hmm.
there it's just a completely different world. Like back then we were, we would get a game for Christmas or birthday or whatever, and then that's what you had for the next few months. Like it now, it's if you don't like a game, you can purchase it the next 45 minutes, not 4 to 5 months. Like it's a
It's
different world.
it's a lot easier to tolerate that, that one game you get for Christmas or a birthday or a holiday or something like that. Having that kind of those kind of mechanics or that structure, that's a lot of trial and error. It's okay because yeah, that's your one game. You almost want it to do that. You want it to have those trappings that force you to try everything, to go everywhere, to talk to everybody. It's okay to do that because you don't have an alternative, right? You don't have a cell phone. You don't have multiple consoles with subscription services, and the landscape is so different now, right?
And it was a
Like,
new experience then. Like back
yeah,
then, like we had never walked around a video game world before.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess you see with sequels to these games doing away as a series like Fallout has evolved, and Final Fantasy, things like that. Like they do move away. You see that movement away from that kind of trial and error, search everywhere type of gameplay, and so even the companies are realizing that as fans have gotten older, like there's less tolerance for that as technology has improved and changed, and the world has changed. Games have changed too, and so I guess we have a problem then, or this is kind of the crux of the episode, is when we're going back to these old games, and it's strict, they're straight ports. They're just, this is the version as it was 20 or 30 years ago. Though those flaws, I guess, they become a lot easier to see and harder to kind of paper over or just kind of ignore.
Hmm.
And so the game I'm going to start talking about in a couple minutes, like I think its fatal flaw is that it spends too much time trying to be something from the past, as opposed to being a 21st century version of something from the past, or I should say, a 2024 version of something from the past. And so I guess this is something we're always struggling with on this podcast is, how much of the past do we want to take forward, or how much can you contort or twist a game that it still retains what made it beautiful in the past, but make it playable, make it fun today. Like, it's hard. Like, I think finding that balance is hard.
Hmm.
Maybe we won't tease the audience anymore.
Yeah. You could jump into it.
And I don't know if we want to put the name of this game in the episode title. We can, but we'll chat about that later. But yeah, without further ado, the game that I've been referring to, Dave and I have both been referring to, is, and yeah, sorry, again, Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. I've been reviewing this game on Switch, and yeah, being kind of part of the impetus for this episode is that I think 100 Heroes is stuck in the past in a lot of ways. I think in trying to be the true spiritual successor to Suikoden, and that's totally what it is. Like, they have, folks who worked on Suikoden, worked on this game too. This is a game that was kickstarted in 2020. It was the most successful video game Kickstarter of that year, reaching almost $5 million on Kickstarter, which is a lot. But 100 Heroes has a lot of issues. And I think they kind of start with the way it tries to be a PlayStation game from 2000. And we're not in that time period anymore. We're not in that generation anymore. Things have changed for the better in RPGs, and 100 Heroes, it spends a little bit too much time kind of just trying to replicate an experience, I suppose, that we don't really have anymore. And the real irony of all this is that in a matter of months, maybe a year, depending on how long the delay lasts, we're going to get a remastered version of Suikoden 1 and 2. And so you're going to have this kind of really interesting comparison between the old becoming deliberately new and, something new that is kind of inspired by something old. And seeing them side by side is going to be fascinating. I'm really looking forward to that, to seeing kind of what Konami does around this topic that we're talking about of trying to make something modern. Like why are you remastering them and not just porting them, right? That's a choice that Konami is making with their old IP. And so what changes are they making to Suikoden 1 and 2, and how are those going to make it maybe stand out, or how are they going to contrast with what Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes does? David, do you remember anything? What you've kind of? I know we've been planning to do an episode on this game, and I think we will do a follow up as well once more people have had their hands on it. But I'm kind of curious what you remember of the game from like trailers or from the Kickstarter campaign or anything like that.
Well, I know the big selling point for it was that it was because the original Suikoden games were based on I think it's like a Japanese folklore of the 100. I think it was like 108 heroes or something. I can't remember the exact, but there was like this old story about 100 heroes that did the some kind of quest or whatever that did something in the past. So it's kind of based on this fairy tale, and the game like Suikoden was kind of supposed to represent that, where you're finding all these heroes and you're building up this party, and that was kind of the impetus behind it. I remember them talking about the inspiration of like you wanting to have that same feel of building the party, and it's going to have kind of the PlayStation aesthetic of I guess back in the day, like Suikoden still kind of stayed with that old SNES kind of look, even though RPGs were starting to move towards like the FMVs and the
That's right.
like the Final Fantasy VII is a perfect example of like the 3D political or whatever polygonal.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
There's Rich's English buff for
Nailed it.
the episode. Yeah, that was where games are going on the CD format, but Konami's like, no, we're gonna do this traditional looking game, and I know that was the whole point of 100 Heroes, is like that you've got the same scenario writer, and this is like the way I was kind of understanding it. Maybe this is on me. It was I felt like it was more of this idea of like, oh, we made this game back then and we enjoyed it, but now we have, with the new technology, we're going to be able to actually like flesh out what we had in our heads. We'll have a better opportunity to make that now.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make the thing that we wanted to make now that we have more capabilities. And so I was under the impression that it would kind of be this kind of old style game, though, because they were still going to keep the the 2D sprites and that kind of old aesthetic. But I was kind of under the impression that things would be a little more modern, in the sense of like when you look, like you said, we mentioned the pixel remasters, where it's like they take these old games, but then they add in the things that we didn't have before, like the saving anywhere or the speed up or this, like just things that it's like games can't waste people's time anymore. Like
No.
it's not cute. Like the nostalgia, like when I'm playing these old games, like that's those time wasting mechanics are not the things that I have nostalgia for. Like when I'm playing Final Fantasy 9, the 4-second delay into a battle is not the thing I fondly remember. Like,
oh, absolutely not. No.
Like especially now when I'm playing, like when you play on the PS5 and you play a game like Final Fantasy Rebirth, and there's not a loading screen in the whole damn game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's no excuse anymore for loading. Like loading should be dead. Like if you have a loading screen, you screwed up. That's my attitude.
Exactly. And so it's funny, like this. So I can only speak to the Switch version of this game. Obviously, that's the one that I'm reviewing, and I'll be very curious to see how the other versions of 100 Heroes turn out. But the Switch version is plagued by loading screens. They are everywhere. They're constant. whether that's entering a building, entering a battle, leaving a battle, you know, exiting or entering a dungeon. Hilariously, there aren't load screens between menus, but the menus hitch. Like every time you try to boot up a menu or start a conversation with someone, there can be a 1 to 5 second delay. Even switching between parts of so you press X, open up your main menu for like your items, your magic equipment, all that stuff. Even switching between those different areas of your menu can have loading, not loading, but it can hitch for 1 or 2, 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. So it becomes incredibly annoying just to navigate menus, to navigate the world when you are constantly loading or hitching, constantly all the time. That's not an old RPG thing necessarily. Like, yeah, obviously loading times were a little more common, but it is an unfortunate part of the Switch version of this game for sure. I want to talk first about random encounters because I think that random encounters have been solved and can be implemented in games, and there's a way to do that, and it is not this way. 100 Heroes random encounter rate is, I would call it, medium to high. There are, in dungeons, it becomes very like frustratingly high because you have like a smaller kind of confined space that you're navigating, and so and then you're trying to solve puzzles within a dungeon, or find where to go or whatever. It can be very frustrating every 10 to 20 seconds to be getting into a random battle. One other problem of the random encounter rate being higher, or just that being a feature in the game, is random encounters, is the fact that at some point you reach, with your party of 6 fighters, or 6 characters, you reach a point where experience points you don't really get a lot of experience points. Like, you hit a level threshold where the experience that enemies give you is very low. And so it has this kind of catch-up logic where there's 100 heroes in the game. So if you bring a new one in to test them out and you want to level them up quickly to the rest of your party, that catch-up logic is built in. So enemies will give more experience to lower level characters. And the flip side of that is that higher level characters get less experience. And so you might hit a level threshold, let's say it's 40, and you've got a character that's 30. The one that's 30 will catch up very quickly, but the ones that are 40 will get next to no experience. And so they won't level up barely at all. And so because of that mechanic, grinding and doing a lot of random battles isn't super helpful unless you're changing your party regularly. And I guess that's maybe what they're encouraging, is to always have new people in your party. But if you do that, and maybe you've got attached to certain characters that you have a fondness with them, those ones aren't getting stronger. The other part of that is that very often you are forced to take 1, 2, 3, or 4 characters in your party. You're there. You have to. They're locked. You have to find either front row or back row or support, but they have to be part of your squad, and you can't move forward without them. And the game kind of has like this annoying message that your party's not full or it's not complete or whatever, and so you can't make any progress unless those locked characters are in your party. And so those ones, I guess you being kind of stuck with them means you're not able to experiment that much, as much as you might want to, or you can only experiment by adding 1 or 2 new characters at a time. But if you've just recruited a dozen of them, it's very hard to get to a point where more of those are joining your ranks, or you're testing them out or getting them to a high level and then seeing if they're actually better than who you have from the past. So the random encounters are tied to other kind of RPG mechanics that don't work out very well in this game. Another kind of issue with random encounters slash party composition is that once you put a character in your party and you equip them with stuff, like let's say you put an accessory on them or a shield or whatever, there's no way to get that item back. If let's say they leave your party or you take them out, you can't get that item back unless you bring them back to your party, deliberately unequip them or put something else on them, and then take them out of your party and put a new person in. So you can't just access your entire inventory of equipment at hand at all times. Like, games from the 90s had this figured out, like ways to unequip. Final Fantasy VI, again, for example, had a way of unequipping everyone in your party. You talk to like the person on the airship when you're doing your party composition, and it'll say like unequip everyone who's not in your party. Again, in 96, 94, we had this figured out. And now in 2024, we don't all of a sudden know how to do this. It's bizarre to me that small things like that, and there are lots of them. I'm going to talk about a handful here, but there are more mechanics like that that aren't part of this game that should be. So in a game with 100 characters where you are either switching your characters out fairly frequently or being locked to other ones, being not being able to remove equipment from old characters or just anyone at any time in your party is unbelievable to me. I can't fathom why in 2024 we are going back to something that's earlier than Final Fantasy VI. It makes no sense. I don't know, David, if you can think of a game where, or an experience in the last 10 years where you've had a problem like that, where equipment was kind of locked, or you had to like literally switch people in and out just to change their equipment. I feel like we've really gotten past that.
No, I can even think of examples like even in again, like Rebirth comes out so often, but like there's a point where one of the characters is removed from the party in the game later in the game, and then the game actually tells you we put all the equipment back in the inventory.
Yeah.
Like everything they had equipped is back in your inventory. So
Why would you not do that? Like,
yeah,
of
it
course,
should
it's
be
so
automatic.
simple.
Yeah.
It should be automatic. Absolutely. These are something. This is something that has been solved for decades, and again, a game with such a huge cast, it is required that you have an ability to quickly move items back and forth between characters, whether that's just at like a safe. And again, so again, where you change party members is at an inn, basically. There's a couple other places I think you can do it, but at an inn is where you save your game, you rest, or you change your party. And I can't believe that when you go to the inn, you don't. Maybe if it's built into it, I'm just missing it. Fine, but it's very hard to see. But I haven't come across any way to quickly move equipment around. I think there's one person in your castle. You have like a castle that you're kind of building up as part of the story, and maybe you can do it there. But that there's only a single place in the whole game where you can do it is almost as much of a sin. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
That's just a slap in the face if that's the
Totally,
case.
it is, and there's a lot of them. 100 hand slaps in the face for sure. One more thing on the random encounter rate. Bravely Default has a very elegant way, and I mentioned this game by name in the review. It has a very elegant way of solving this problem, and that puts random encounters on a slide meter. So if you want 100% of random encounters as they normally are in the game, you can have that. If you want 200%, you really want to grind up maybe some new characters you've added to your team in 100 Heroes, you just put the slider to 200%, and we're doing random battles every few steps. Fine. Because I'm trying to grind. I have some reason for doing that. I want to get some more money or whatever, buy some new equipment. Or you can slide it to 0, because you don't want random encounters when you're in a dungeon trying to figure out what the puzzle is, or how to advance, or how to get to the end of the dungeon. So you turn them off. And Bravely Default doesn't have long, circuitous, really boring or frustrating dungeons. The areas of Bravely Default are very small, and it still has an ability to turn off random encounters. And this is a game in Japan, it was released in 2012, so it's 12 years old. But we've had other games like this, traditional style RPGs where they recognize that random encounters and things like that are old hat, right? They're old mechanics that there's not a lot of tolerance for today. And so they find a way to mitigate that, or at least make it an option. It's a toggle. Why is
Well,
that not something here?
yeah, I was just thinking of in Golden Sun is a perfect example. Like there's random encounters in that game, whether on the overworld or in a dungeon.
Yeah.
But the great thing about Golden Sun is that when you get to a room where there's a puzzle, the random encounters are off. Like
Right. Yes.
there's none in that room. So you can look around and you could be like, okay, well, how do I manipulate this? How do I move that? What needs to happen here? What needs to happen there? And you don't have to be interrupted every few seconds with a random encounter. They just turn them off for the puzzle rooms. And I think that's like the perfect way to do it. And then again, to go back to the pixel remasters, the obviously that was in an era where there was random encounters no matter where you were,
Mm-hmm.
but their workaround for that is that, like, we all know that the majority of random encounters are just very quick. I'm more powerful than you, you're probably not going to really hurt me, maybe you'll take a small chunk, but it's a couple moves and then we move on.
Yeah,
So the Pixel Remasters has like the auto feature in where like you don't even have to, when the random encounter happens, you don't have to do anything. You have like a pre-programmed, like this character does this move, this character does this
that's
move,
right.
and
That's right.
then the match is over, and you know, a few seconds go by and I move on with my life. Like that again is a nice compromise, but that is like trying to fix an old game. So it's,
Exactly. That's
you
right.
know,
That's right.
it's like Golden Sun was like the okay where it's 2006 or whatever it is. You know, people are you know, random encounters are starting to die. This was even when I around when like Final Fantasy 12 came out, and that was
Right.
the first time that it's like, well, no, like screw the random encounters. Like you we just show you where the enemy is now, and if you don't want to fight them, just walk around.
Yeah, and man, I really think that's how we have to. If you're not going to have like an option for them, I think that's how these older games need to be. Like, I guess Bravely Default 2 switched to that, right? It
Yeah,
moved enemies to being on the overworld as opposed to having a toggle for random encounters. And I think that player choice is important, right? If you want to fight people to gain experience and get stronger, you can do that. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I think making more things choices is good for everybody. You know, that has to be. I think a big part of game development these days is, and I'm not a game developer. I'm only speaking, you know, as a fan, as someone who has
the
been
person
playing
paying the
games.
money for the
Yeah,
game
well,
developer to make
exactly.
the game.
Yeah,
You know,
this isn't a
the
customer's always
consumer.
right thing. It's what's just better for people who have limited time these days is you have to make more things options, you know, difficulty options. You know, we've talked about difficulty options before, and that is part of this discussion as well. Like, how do we make games more accessible and approachable to more people? Is we make things like random encounters an option, like that's built in here too. Funny thing is, you eventually gain the ability to add members to your team that are support, and so they don't actually fight with you, but they can bestow like certain out of combat perks, or even in battle they can give you like buffs as well. So there is a support character you find. I believe she's part of the story, so you're going to get her no matter what. But having her on your squad and you're in a support role means your random encounter rate goes down considerably. But I think you recruit this character probably more than halfway into the game, and so by that time you've already wasted a lot of your play session, your play time on random encounters and frustrating dungeon situations. So that and again, I think you only have one support slot. So if you take this character, then you can't take one that lets you move faster, like literally move faster in the overworld, which I love having that one because I'm like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
trying to run through this game to finish it for review. I want to keep this one, but then I have to do all the random encounters. So running faster, but having the same number of random encounters isn't really helping me, right? It's not actually making me faster. So, but maybe I want to take one that lets me pull more resources out of slots, out of kind of gathering areas, gathering points, so I can build up my town. Okay, I can only choose that one. You know, again, making it a forced choice of, you know, which modern sensibility, which modern mechanic do you want? Like, give me all of them. Like, don't make it like I have to choose a particular hero to get this bonus. Not only do I have to unlock the hero, but then I have to choose which one I want on my squad. Like that's not the way to solve this problem. Like it's kind of interesting. And again, if that were something from 2000 or the 90s and that's how you made that choice, that would be interesting. But in 2024, that it's more like a slap in the, again, we talk about slapping in the face. There's another one right there, is you have to add a particular character to get the 2024 mechanic that you should already have anyway. So that's it's just kind of dumb. I don't like it.
yeah. Well, again, and back then too, a lot of the reason why you would have limitations on those sort of things is because the technology just wasn't available. Like you couldn't have the computer processing, you know, all these different mechanics at once because the processor just wasn't good enough. And
Yeah.
now we've gotten to the point where yeah, you can have like multiple things. Like it can be remembering things that happened from earlier in the game. It can be processed like we're in a new world of technology that these, you know, you can have hundreds of thousands of different things being tracked by the computer that,
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas you only had so much RAM back in the past, you know.
Exactly. Let me get into the story a little bit, some of the characters, some of what's happening in this game. Very, very early stuff. No spoilers. Obviously, I do talking about this game is more about the mechanics and the RPG ness of it, I guess. But yeah, so the story involves kind of two factions. This world of Galdea, you have like an empire, Imperials who are kind of slowly trying to take over the world, and it's not clear right away that that's their goal, but very early on, you do start to realize that, and it becomes like a empire versus the alliance type deal, and so. You have this character Noah, who is kind of the protagonist. And he ends up becoming the leader of the alliance very early on, and so part of your goal, you kind of get ousted from some of the early towns where the game takes place, and you start to go on this recruiting drive to different kingdoms, that are part of. You want them to be part of this alliance and to resist the empire, resist the imperial rule. And so, but that's most of the game is going from place to place, recruiting folks, recruiting kind of larger kingdoms to your cause, all in an effort to resist the empire, and so you have to be convincing people like, oh, the Imperials are bad, like they are trying to take over from you, and what they've offered you, it's not real. And so you often, when you get to like a new kingdom area, you have to like convince the king or the rulers there of the threat that the empire is kind of presenting, I guess. And maybe you have to do like quests to kind of show your loyalty or show like that you're genuine, or to maybe elucidate the real threat that is being presented, or maybe someone is not loyal to the cause or something like that, and you have to kind of I guess reveal their hidden agenda, something like that. So as you go, like there are characters that join your squad kind of naturally as part of the plot, but there's many more that you actually have to seek out in towns or other areas. And so a frustrating part of the recruitment is that people won't just join you right away. And I guess this is a gameplay thing. You have to maybe do something for them. Maybe you have to defeat them in combat, or you have to bring them a certain recipe, or a lot of the times I don't even know what they're asking for. Like I don't know why they won't join my team. Like for one example, that's kind of around where I'm playing the game right now, or kind of returning to different towns and kind of trying to add different people to my squad. He wants like a hot spring to be built in our castle, so that eventually, when the alliance kind of becomes a little bit more cemented as a faction, you take over these ruins and you kind of make it into a castle. And so one gameplay mechanic that exists is you take resources that you acquire in the overworld and in dungeons, and you build up the castle. You build up this castle town, I guess. You give it a name, and then you there's a menu you can access where you kind of use blueprints, I guess, to build different areas, like build a forge, build an inn, build a extra storage space for your resources and things like that. So you're recruiting people. They come to your town, and maybe they have a specific talent or thing they're looking for in the town. So this one, it looks like a mole, like some kind of animal creature, and there's a lot of like animals in this game that are, I guess, humanoid types or anthropomorphic. David, you'll remember the kangaroo character from Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. Guru, I think his name is.
Yeah.
So this character's like that. Anyway, I'm trying to recruit this mole to my town. He's like, "Oh, we want a hot spring." And so I'm like, "Okay, I'll build you a hot spring." So I go to the area of the castle where I can choose what parts I want to build. And I've got all the resources. I've got the money to afford the hot spring. And it says, to build the hot spring, I need to have a particular character in my castle to build it for me. And it's the same character in the town that's asking me to build a hot spring. And so I don't know how to recruit this guy because he's asking for a hot spring. Oh, if you have a hot spring, we'll come to your town. But I can't build the hot spring without him. And there's a lot of these kind of disconnects in the game where people are asking you for something and you want to give it to them, but you can't because the thing they're asking for requires them. Like, and so I've built up the town almost in no way at all, because a lot of the ways that it gates off progress is you need to have character X to build structure Y. And so I've got all the money, I've got all the stone and lumber and food resources to build these things. And my coffers are literally at their limit. I can't I, I can't have any more gold acquired by the kingdom to spend on structures. But all the places that I want to build require a particular hero that I don't have on my team. And so you have to, I guess, you have to scour the world to find people to join your town or complete their tasks, but then if their tasks require you to build something in the town, it's kind of a domino kind of effect that I'm just not able to knock down that first domino. I don't know, but it's just, I think it's a very frustrating way to implement the base building in this game, is tying it to the hero recruitment, which in itself is frustrating because you don't there's no list of all the people you've encountered in the world. There's a list of like story quests, and so you do kind of know what to do next. It's hidden in the world menu, so if people are looking for it, it's there. It took me a little while to find that, but you don't make a record of like the characters you encounter and what they're looking for, which would be monumentally helpful in a game where your objective is to recruit 100 heroes. Why would you not have some kind of listing or journal or diary where you make a note of who you've encountered and what they need from you? How is that on in this game? Like, again, it boggles my mind that primary mechanics are made more difficult by a lack of simple kind of like journaling or listing of things. I don't get it. David, help me out here.
Yeah, and there's so many examples of having those things, like, you know, the Fallout games that we talked about before, like the regular ones. Like, you could have like big lists of, like, you know, here's some active quests, here's your completed quests. Well, Unicorn Overlord that I'm playing now is that same way, where there's like, well, there's this, you know, there's this town that you could go liberate, or you could continue the main quest, or like, it just got a list of them. Like, yeah, like a list of the things. Expecting the player to have a piece of paper and a pen is ridiculous in 2020 and
That's
anything after the
exactly
2000s. You know,
that's exactly what I was thinking about. I'm like, do I literally have to write these down? So I'd have to write down where they are, like what town they're in, maybe what part of the town they're in. I'd have to write down what they're looking for, what their name is, like, and then what's
no,
really
that's
funny,
crazy.
if you haven't encountered someone in so let's say you haven't run into a character, but you need that character for part of the base building, it literally shows up as a silhouette. So it's a silhouette in the town, in the base building kind of menuing. So you don't even know who you're looking for. It's literally like a
Yeah,
black silhouette. So I'm like, I have to try to find an NPC in a town that looks like this silhouette. Is that what you're asking me to do? Like, and then again, let's say they're not in a town. Let's say they're in a dungeon or something, or and some characters can be found in dungeons. I have to brave the random encounters without my super speed support character, or maybe I don't equip them. I have to equip the random encounter one or someone else, maybe a resource gathering one, to go back to an old dungeon that I've already completed, which is again very very maze like and labyrinthian, to find maybe a character that's in there that may be the one who I need to advance my base building prospects. Like you see how these like bad decisions just kind of layer on top of each other, which makes the exploring or the seeking out of characters or the putting time and effort into the base building mechanic make and I don't know I don't even know yet what the reasoning behind the base building is. Like, yes, I can get new structures in my town, like a new item shop or a new weapon shop, but I can just go to I can fast travel to a different town and find those things. Why do I need it in my hometown? So one other thing that happens with the base building is your population goes up, like your total population, and maybe this is going to have like something at the end game. Yeah, your town is yay big, so you get a bonus in the final battle or something like that. But it's not even clear what all the base building I'm doing, what kind of I guess payoff that's having, and so that's frustrating too. It's just not knowing how much time and effort should I put into doing all this recruiting or finding all these heroes. And one of the things I want to end with here is your kind of impression of like just a game like this, a game where you do recruit dozens of characters, but you have a limited party size. Like you're only bringing 6 characters into battle. Why do you need 100? Like, why do you need to have a stable of 100? I do think it's fun to find new ones and realizing that they have different perks and things like that. But the way you get abilities in this game is by equipping ruins. The ruins, I should say, not RUNES, not INS. You equip these, and so they go in like a grid sort of that you can, as you level up, you get more grid spaces. the ruin system doesn't work very well at all. Like it's very hard to find out which ruins go in, can be equipped to which character or which slots. Again, all of that I don't think is described or explained very well. But anyways, the way that characters get new abilities is by equipping these ruins, and so you don't get a lot of difference with the unique characters that you're finding. Like, yes, they have a different, like, they look different, and maybe they can equip some slightly different ruins or slightly different equipment, but there isn't a lot of draw to bringing new people into your party when the abilities that they have are largely determined by equipment. So it's not even like you're finding unique characters that have, like, oh, this one has this, like, this super move. Like, I really want to get him. Like, I think some of them have that. Like, one character I found really early on, he has this charge ability where if you charge for 2 turns and he charges up like his to full power, his basic attack or his one of his like the special move you get from a ruin can do like 600 or 700 damage, which is quite a lot. And so I've had him in the party whenever I have a space to do so, because he's very good at boss encounters. But other than that, like having like maybe one unique ability, and if your unique ability is like a charge move or raising your evasion or dodge, like they're so boring. Like they're not even fun unique abilities to the characters that do have them. So I'm just left at a loss by a lot of the pieces of this game. I don't think they work very well together. I think from an RPG mechanic standpoint, I think the game is definitely trapped in the past, and not in good ways, in mostly bad ways. And so I suppose if you're very excited for another Suikoden experience that hasn't aged at all and plays just like maybe the first Suikoden game, maybe you're really going to like this game. But I think the performance is really bad. I think the mechanical decisions are bad. And I think just the way that the different elements of the game work together is very fragmented, and not in any sense like modern contemporary. I think it's just a poor effort all around. And the only lasting impression I have of this game, or lasting kind of feeling I have, is bring on the Konami remasters. Like let's see what Suikoden 1 and 2 look like with a fresh coat of paint, because this ain't it. This definitely ain't it.
I'd say the true 100 Heroes experience is Unicorn Overlord.
Yeah. Oh, please play that game, man. That's a good one, and I'm really glad that you're getting into it, David. I think you finally gotten to that point in Unicorn Overlord where you're forced to deal with the gambit system and
Yeah.
changing up what abilities your characters do. And I think as soon as you get into the team composition and ability composition in that game, it really does kind of hit its stride.
Yeah, I've liberated every town possible at this point in the game in Cornea. So now I'm forced to go into the other domains. So
That's right. That's right.
I took one. I accidentally walked into the Elven domain
Yeah,
because
I did that too. I did that too.
yeah, I was looking at the map and it showed a town. And I'm like, oh, I missed a town in Cornea. I guess I'll go there. And then it was like, no, actually, this is in the Elven domain. I'm like, oh crap. So I ended up leaving before the battle. I got like a story scene of what was going on there, but I headed over to the Drakenhold because
Yeah, I did the exact same thing.
yeah, because there was like a mention of like, if we don't go there now, then your cousin might be in trouble. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, we better. Clearly, the game is yeah. Clearly, the game is wanting me to go in that direction, but not taking, like, again, this is player choice. Like they're
Yes.
saying like, this is what we think you should do, but hey, if you want to do something else, you go right ahead.
Yeah, I think if you want a little bit of a harder time, you can go to the Elven Kingdom, where maybe the levels are a little bit higher. You can really push yourself if you have a good sense of moving your team members around, or I guess organizing your squads, organizing your units. You could do that for sure.
But I mean, that's a masterclass in inventory systems, because
Yes,
when
yes, it's
you go
so
into the
good
menu,
there.
yes, you go into the menu and you're like, okay, here's all the swords, and it'll show every single sword you own, and it'll show you who's got it equipped at this moment, and then it'll be like, here's all your bows, here's all your shields. Like, it just shows you a great big screen and every single one that's either equipped or not equipped, and who has it. So you got like that all mapped out, and then you've got you go into your screen and it says, okay, here's like your team so far, and there's this person here, like, and it shows like a little screen of every single team of like 3 or 4, depending on how big the teams are that you've unlocked, and shows all the characters there. And then the thing I love the most in there is that when you actually go, like, say you unlock a new team, and it's like, okay, here's, you can put 3 people on this in this team. Who do you want to put there? And when you click on the screen, it tells you, it shows every single person you've recruited, but it also has an indicator on what team they're already in. So if you've got, if you could have 4 people on the top row, and they're like, well, these are all on team 1, and these are team 2 and 3, and eventually, like, it's just like a cluster of, like, they're all over the place. Like,
Yeah.
I got some here, some there, whatever, but they all show like an indicator of, like, well, this person's already equipped to this team. Do you actually want to remove them or not? And then it tells you who's not equipped anywhere, and it's just like, something, when you get into that many characters,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be pandemonium.
Of
So
course it is.
if
And
yeah,
yeah.
so it has to be structured in a way that I'm not wasting time in the menus, because if I'm in the menu, I'm not having fun.
Yeah, menus suck. Like, don't
Yeah.
do menus. Don't force me to do more menus. Or if you do want me to spend time in menus, make the menus accessible and very easy to navigate. And that Unicorn Overlord does a very good job of that. It's actually excellent. Like, it does have 100 heroes. It has about 60, but it certainly is no chore to move them in and out, or to improve them, or to change their equipment. It is dead easy, and that's how it should be when in a game with more than 12 heroes. I'll give you one more thing on 100 heroes, Eiyuden Chronicle, before we leave here, and you'll like this. It kind of ties into Unicorn Overlord a little bit. So you mentioned having a list of, like, all the swords that are in your inventory, equipped to all of your members, and you can move them around. And if one person has a sword and you want to put on someone else, that's not a big deal. You can just do that very easily. In Eiyuden Chronicle, no one has. You don't change weapons. Everyone has the same weapon throughout the whole game. And so what you do to improve them is you go to a blacksmith. So a blacksmith is a specific shop in town. Not every town has them. So you need to go to a town that has a blacksmith. So that's frustration number one. Number two is every single person their weapon can be upgraded multiple times to a limit. Let's say the part of your game the limit is 5. So I upgrade everyone's equipment to 5. That probably uses up most of the money I've earned by that point. So now I'm out of money. If I change anyone in my party, I have to do the exact same thing, step by step. I have to take their weapon level from 1 to 5. I won't have the money for that because I've already used all my money upgrading the 6 heroes that were in my party. If as I say, I change out like 2 or 3 party members, put new ones in, or maybe the game forces me to play with new characters that are locked to my roster, okay, I got to go back to another blacksmith and upgrade all of their weapons to level 5, right? And then maybe I only use them for like a couple battles, and then I really don't like these locked heroes, so I put them back in the stable, and maybe they never come out again. I don't know. So now I've got maybe I can go back to the previous ones before that I leveled up, but now I'm in a part in the game where everyone's blacksmith level can go up to level 7. So now I've got to do the whole thing again, level everyone's weapon up first to 5, then to 6, then to 7, and it's step by step like that. You can't just advance it to level 7. You have to go step by step. And every one of those steps costs a lot of money. And so you're doing that for everyone in your party. Oh, did you recruit 10 more people? Do you want some of them to join your team? Well, you got to do the same thing. Go to a blacksmith, put them up to level 7. Maybe it's level 9 now. Go up to 7, go to 8, go to 9. And you're doing the same thing ad nauseum for 100 heroes. Why is a game doing why in 2024 is that the progression for weapons in this game, as opposed to go to a store, maybe it's the armor and weapon store, buy a weapon, equip it to this person. When I'm not using them, I can put it on somebody else. It's somewhat ubiquitous, as opposed to every one of your 100 heroes having individual weapon levels that have to be paid for on an individual scale, going up one level at a time. I can't just say,
Yeah,
oh,
it's
I'm a level
wild.
5 weapon, I'm going to go to level 10. Just charge me 10 grand, as opposed to, nope, pay 2,000 for level 6, pay 2,500 for level 7, 3,000 for level 8, etc., etc. How is this a thing? How did
Oh, that's
that
wild.
get past lot check? How did that get past not lot check? How did it get past like Q&A, or just
Yeah.
some kind of discussion or feature meeting? Like, oh, this is how we'll do weapons in this game, and no one put up their hand. Like, seriously, it's totally stuck in the past in ways like that. Frankly, that's not even a past thing. That's just a dumb thing that someone invented for no reason at all. I can't think of many games that have their progression tied to a system like that.
Yeah.
And again,
Well, That
I haven't
reminds me
even,
of
David, you'll
materia.
love this. I haven't even found a blacksmith to join my castle town. So in my castle town, I can't even upgrade anyone's weapons. And again, maybe I
Oh,
missed recruiting this character somewhere. I don't know where they are. The base building just sucks in this game. So I don't know. I have to go to like one of the big towns that are, again, not easy to navigate. I guess I can go to a menu, but I have to run to the blacksmith in that town and do all this really annoying, frustrating process. So I don't know.
I've
Multiple times during reviewing this game, I've been like, kind of like, I'm done. I don't want to go further. And I've pushed myself. I'm trying to see the ending. And yeah, I'm just not having a very good time of it.
I'm flipping my table on your behalf.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we ever come across a game where that's the way that you build up your weapon skill, your weapon
Oh man.
proficiency, just shoot me now. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
want to
that
do it.
makes me think of materia because it's kind of the same thing, but with spells, right? Like,
Yeah.
why would I take like why do I have to build like cloud? Like for example, do I have to specifically like build up the fire, the ice, the poison, or whatever? Whereas now they're like, no, just level up the materia,
Yes,
and then
exactly.
instead of if you go into a certain fight and you only have these three characters, then it's like, okay, well, I'll just take the high level materia away from someone who's not in this fight, stick it in, and again in the menu system, it's bing bang boom. It shows
Yeah.
every materia you have. It shows the level of the materia. It shows who has the materia, and then you could take it from them, and they'll ask you like, you sure? And I'm like, yep. Take it from Barrett. He's not fighting. Stick it on Cloud. He needs to do Fire Egg or this battle or whatever. And then you flip it back, and then that the other thing is you can build it up quicker that way too, because you can flip flop between them, and you're like, oh well, this is only level 2 material. I'll give it to the party that I'm using now, so we can build it up to 3 real quick.
Hold on. Are you telling me you don't need to go to an inn, switch Cloud out of your party, put Barrett in
Yeah.
your party, take out the materia from Barrett, take Barrett out of your party, put Cloud back in your party, and then put the materia on Cloud instead? You don't need to do all those 10 steps? Oh my, yeah. At any rate.
If maybe the game would run a bit better if it skipped a few steps like that.
Yeah,
Didn't
yeah. Or maybe it'd be more
save up some
tolerable if
processing
I didn't
time.
have to go through 10 steps with loading screens in between
Yeah.
and menus that hitch constantly just to put a particular item that maybe increases my stats by 1% from a hero it was on before. Yeah, those would be good things.
Takes you 15 minutes to go through the inventory to save yourself 60 seconds on the overworld map.
I'm bracing myself for when our review comes out, and so we're recording this on a Saturday. The episode will post soon to patrons, and then the game comes out on the 23rd. So people will be listening to this, when the game's already out, reviews are already out, and all that stuff. You'll be able to see my review on NWR and our YouTube channel and stuff. But I'm very curious to see, like, is this going to be a tale of two kind of review factions? Is it going to be the people that grew up with Suikoden and love that series, and they're like, oh, this is just like I remembered, and they're maybe kind of seeing it through that lens of like, it is just like the games I remembered, and so they like it for that reason. Whereas someone like me, who I don't have a ton of experience with Suikoden, and I don't have that fondness, I do think I'm seeing it through maybe a more generalized perspective, and I can't see past the flaws in this game. And again, those are outside of performance-based ones. The performance is very poor on Switch, both in terms of the way it looks and the way it runs. But then I just think mechanically, I think it's very, very suspect, and I think the decisions made in this game's development are very odd. I've been kind of hesitant to call it like, how Kickstarters, like, they're not, there's a reason the games are kickstarted, right? It's because there isn't like a full team behind these games, and it's a proven studio that's made games before and made mistakes and learned from them. This is kind of a collection of people put together to make a game, right? And you're recruiting folks from different studios and different experience levels and stuff like that, and they're all kind of culminating in something that hopefully works out. And for my money, I don't think it has worked out. I think that this maybe feels like a first draft or a first effort, and that needs an incredible amount of polishing. And I wonder if they tried to kind of push it out maybe before Konami's re-releases come out, the remasters come out. Maybe that was part of the goal. Maybe they've just kind of run out of money by this time. Like, again, it having been a Kickstarter, eventually you want to get that product to the people that gave you money for it. I know this is a game that was developed, during lockdown, during the pandemic, and I think was pushed. The release date was pushed because of that. If this game were released a year ago, I'd hate to see what state it would be in, because I think in 2024, I still don't think it's ready. But again, I'm eager to see the discourse, and if people do really attach to it, I'm sure there will be folks that do, with the hero recruiting and stuff like that, and maybe just the things that are a little bit harder to understand for someone who's not super well versed in Suikoden games. But yeah, I think it's a miss, and I think it's a pretty clear one, honestly.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I'm sure we may have a retrospective on the game at one point in the future.
Yeah, yeah,
For
we
me,
should.
it will require a steep discount on the
Yes, that's right. A steep discount, or maybe a discount, like a free code type of discount.
yeah. If
Like that.
a code happens to come by, then yeah, maybe at some point. But if not, I'll be definitely waiting for this one to hit a steep sale before
Yeah, yeah.
taking the plunge.
Hit a humble bundle or something
Maybe
like that.
a few months worth of patches too, or something.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so just wanted to share some impressions on that game. Very interested to see how it turns out, how people find it, and we'll keep that conversation going. Hopefully, pick it up again maybe later in the month. But yeah, that'll do it for this episode. I hope everyone braced themselves for a little bit more of a negative kind of spin type episode, which doesn't always happen. It doesn't often happen with us. We're pretty positive about games and what we like about them and stuff like that. But this one, I think we're also able to see the other side, where older games don't always age super well, and what elements of them maybe need to be just kind of stay remaining in the past, and not brought forward in 2024.
Well, our mission statement has always been to point people towards the best gaming experiences, but sometimes that means preventing people from going down the wrong path too.
Pointing them away from bad experiences, maybe, right? Not always towards good, but here's something to stay away from as well. Yeah, no, that's totally true. But anyways, hope folks had a good time listening to this episode. Let us know. You can reach out to David at thethirstymage.com by email, or we've got a Discord channel. We'd love to hear what people think there as well. But yeah, hope everyone has a great week ahead, and we'll talk to you again soon on The Thirsty Mage. Bye for now.